The ink on the paper. A story about what we almost lost. Muyun and Liuhe are married. They have been married for 3 years. Liuhe loves Muyun deeply and has been quietly building their life together. Muyun loves Liuhe too, but he has stopped paying attention to him. He spends all his time talking to Yanfei about creative work, and he treats Yanfei like the most important person in his life without realizing he is doing it. Liuhe waits. He tries to be seen. He cannot make Muyun look at him. Eventually, after a long time of feeling invisible, he decides to leave. He prepares divorce papers and leaves them on Muyun's desk to be read and signed. One afternoon, Muyun is on the phone with Yanfei, laughing and excited about a new creative idea. His assistant brings him a pile of documents to sign. Muyun signs all of them without reading any of them, including the divorce papers Liuhe left. When Muyun finally looks up, the apartment is too quiet. He walks through the rooms and notices 3 books gone from the shelf. A sculpture Liuhe loved gone. Liuhe's keys sitting on the kitchen counter instead of on the hook by the door. Liuhe has already left. Muyun reads the divorce papers. He understands what he signed. He understands what he did not just today but for 3 years. This is where the story truly begins. Chapter 1. The afternoon he signed without reading. The phone call with Yanfei had been going for almost an hour. Muyun did not notice. This was not unusual. When he was talking to Yanfei about work, time disappeared. Yanfei was describing a new idea for their collaborative project. Something about art that admits to being unfinished, love letters that know they will never be delivered. Muyun was scribbling notes with one hand and thinking 3 chapters ahead with the other part of his brain, the part that never fully stopped writing. His assistant, Ran, appeared in the study doorway for the 3rd time that afternoon. She was holding a folder. Her expression was the expression of a woman who had learned, over 2 years, not to interrupt Muyun when he was on the phone, but who also needed things signed before the end of the business day. Muyun waved her in without looking. He pointed at the desk. He mouthed, "Just leave it." She left the folder and went. He signed the documents inside it without looking at them. 3 pages, quick and automatic, the way he signed everything when his head was somewhere better. He did not read the headers. He did not read the dates. He did not read the names printed at the top of page 1. Ran came back and collected the signed folder. He heard the study door close. The call with Yanfei ended 20 minutes later on a high note. Both of them excited, both of them full of ideas. Muyun set his phone down and sat for a moment in the warm glow of a writer who has found something worth chasing. Then he noticed the apartment. It was quiet. Not the familiar quiet of Liuhe working in the other room, the quiet that had background texture, small sounds, movement, the sense of another person existing nearby. This was a different quiet. Flat. Empty. Muyun got up from his desk. He walked to the living room. Everything looked correct at first. Then he looked more carefully. There was a rectangular outline of clean wood on the bookshelf. Dust around an empty space where 3 books had stood. The side table near the window was bare. Liuhe had kept a small ceramic sculpture there, something he had bought on a work trip 2 years ago. It was gone. Muyun walked to the kitchen. Liuhe's keys were on the counter. Not on the hook beside the door where they always were. On the counter, set down carefully, with the little silver compass charm catching the light. He picked them up. They were cold. He went back to his desk. He opened the copy folder. Ran always left a copy of everything signed. He opened it. He read the first line of the first page. Divorce agreement. Party A, Zhang Muyun. Party B, Shun Liuhe. He read it again. He read all 3 pages, slowly, the way he had not read them the first time. His own signature was at the bottom. Casual. Quick. The handwriting of a man who was not paying attention. He sat very still for a long time. The apartment was quiet around him. He had signed away his marriage on the phone talking about art that admits to being unfinished, and he had not even noticed. He called Liuhe's number. For rings. Voicemail. He sat in the dark study holding Liuhe's cold keys and tried to remember the last time he had really looked at his husband. Not glanced at, not been in the same room as, but actually looked at with his full attention the way he looked at things that mattered to him. He could not find it. He searched back through the weeks and could not find a single moment of full attention. This told him everything. Chapter 2: How They Met and How They Married. 4 years ago, at a gallery opening neither of them wanted to attend, Muyun had been standing near the bar with a glass of red wine, composing sentences in his head and ignoring the room, when a man sat on the stool beside him and said without any introduction at all, "The bronze piece in the corner is the only honest thing here." Muyun had looked up. The man was composed and quietly angular, with dark, steady eyes aimed at a small sculpture across the room. He was not performing interest in the art. He was actually looking at it, actually thinking about it. In a room full of people performing, this was remarkable. "Why honest?" Muyun asked. "Because it doesn't pretend to be finished," the man said. "You can see exactly where the artist stopped. It's a record of what they could do and when they stopped. Everything else here is too polished, too certain of itself." "You're an architect," Muyun said. He could tell by the way the man looked at space. "Yes, Shin Liuhe. Jiang Muyun. I write novels." "I know. I've read 2 of them." A pause. "Your second one is better than people say it is." It was Muyun's least successful book. Almost nobody said that about it. They talked for 2 hours. They missed the entire formal event. Muyun went home and wrote 4 pages of a new novel, the best 4 pages he had written in over a year, and did not understand until much later that the 2 things were connected. They dated carefully. Both of them were people who did not trust easily. Liuhe moved in after a year. He brought order to Muyun's chaos without flattening it. He kept track of appointments, remembered names, cooked dinner when Muyun forgot to eat, adjusted recipes to Muyun's preferences without being asked and without mentioning he had done it. He built a home around Muyun like a good building. Every element chosen for a reason, nothing decorative that wasn't also useful. They married in a small ceremony with close friends. It was a good day. Muyun wrote 4 novels in 3 years of marriage, the most productive period of his career. He told interviewers it was because of his creative collaboration with Yanfei. He told himself the same thing. He did not notice that the thing actually holding his life steady, the appointments kept, the dinners made, the quiet home he could work inside, was Liuhe. Liuhe noticed that Muyun did not notice. He said nothing. He kept building. He kept hoping that one day Muyun would look up from his work and see what was right beside him. He waited too long. Muyun never looked up. Chapter 3: What Was in the Cupboard. On the 3rd day after finding the keys, Muyun walked through every room in the apartment slowly. He was trying to understand what he did not know about his own home, about his own life, about the person he had been sharing it with for 3 years. In the bedroom, he found an empty space on the nightstand. Liuhe had been reading a book there. Muyun had not known what book. He had not thought to ask. A photograph was missing from the dresser. He could see the lighter square on the wood where it had stood. He could not fully remember what the photograph had shown. In the kitchen, he opened a cupboard he apparently had never opened in 3 years. On the inside of the door, pinned neatly, was a handwritten list. Grocery items, reorder notes, delivery schedules for things that ran out regularly. And in the margin, next to one item in small careful writing, Muyun preference. Liuhe had been tracking what Muyun liked, adjusting the shopping around him, without ever mentioning it. For 3 years, Muyun took a photograph of the list on his phone. He could not make himself take it down. He called Liuhe every day for 6 days. Voicemail every time. On the 7th day, he left a message. He said, "I read it. I read all of it this time. I found the list in the cupboard that I never opened. I understand what that means about how I was living. I am not calling to argue or explain or ask for anything. I just need you to know that I finally read it." An hour later, his phone buzzed with a text message. "I heard your message. I am not ready to talk yet. Please don't call the office. L. Short. Clear. A boundary stated plainly. Very Liuhe." Muyun put his phone down and sat at his kitchen table and looked at the cupboard, the one he had never opened, and left it open. He left it open for weeks. He needed to see it every day. He needed the reminder of what inattention looked like when you finally turned the light on. Chapter 4: The Honest Conversation with Yanfei. Yanfei called on the 8th day after Liuhe left. You've been quiet, he said, warm and slightly confused. Are you deep in a chapter? No, Muyun said. Liuhe left. A pause. What do you mean? I mean, he prepared divorce papers 3 weeks ago, and I signed them without reading them because I was on the phone with you. A longer pause. Muyun, I'm sorry. Are you all right? I'm trying to understand what I did, Muyun said. Not just last week. For 3 years. They met for coffee 2 days later. In person, without a creative project between them to hide behind. Muyun said the most honest thing he had said to anyone in a long time. I used our friendship to avoid being present in my marriage. I don't think I meant to do it. But every time things felt hard at home, every time I felt the distance growing between me and Liuhe, I called you instead of dealing with it. Being around you felt easier and more exciting than doing the work of actually being a husband. Yanfei was quiet for a moment. That's a hard thing to say. I know. I'm not blaming you. You didn't do anything wrong. I made you into something you weren't. An escape. A substitute for the life I was supposed to be living. Do you love him? Yanfei asked. Yes, Muyun said. He didn't hesitate. I have been loving him badly without knowing I was doing it badly. But yes, I love him. Yanfei looked at him across the table. Then go fix it, he said simply. Stop talking to me about it and go fix it. They finished their coffee. They parted kindly. Muyun walked home feeling something settle in him. Not peace, not resolution, but the specific clarity of a person who has stopped lying to himself and is now standing in the full truth of what they have done. He went home. He sat at his desk. He did not write fiction. He wrote the most honest document of his life. Not for anyone to read, just for himself. What he had done wrong, specifically with evidence. The cupboard list. 3 years of not asking follow-up questions. The way he had credited Yanfei in interviews for the creative energy that had actually come from the stability Liuhe built. Every specific failure of attention he could name. He wrote for 3 hours. He named everything. He needed to see it clearly before he could do anything about it. Chapter 5. Liuhe's side of the story. Liuhe was staying in a serviced apartment 20 minutes from his office. He had chosen it because it was close to work and because it was completely impersonal. Nothing in it that he had chosen, nothing that carried any history. He needed, for a while, to be somewhere that asked nothing of him. He had known he was going to leave for 6 months before he left. The decision had not arrived dramatically. It had arrived the way structural failures arrive, quietly after a long time of stress on something that was not being maintained. A slow recognition that the foundation had shifted and would not shift back on its own. He had not left because he stopped loving Muyun. He had left because he had spent 3 years loving someone who was not looking at him, and he had reached the point, carefully, honestly, after a long time of trying, where he had to choose between his dignity and his hope. He chose his dignity. He packed his things while Muyun was in the study on the phone with Yanfei, and he left the keys on the counter. And he did not leave a note because everything he needed to say was already in the divorce papers if Muyun read them. Muyun did not read them. Not until after he had signed them and Liuhe was already gone. Liuhe sat with this for a while, the specific pain of having said everything clearly and still not being heard, and then he put it away and went to work. Wei Shu noticed something was wrong on a Wednesday. She appeared in Liuhe's office doorway with her lunch and said, "You're eating at your desk. That's new. I have a deadline. You always have a deadline. You used to come eat with us." She walked in and sat on the chair beside his drafting table without being invited. "What happened?" "I left my husband," Liuhe said. Plainly, the way he said everything. Wei Shu was quiet. Then, "I'm sorry. It was the right thing to do." "Those can both be true," she said. "Something can be right and still hurt." "Yes," Liuhe said. "I know." She stayed and ate lunch with him. She talked about the project they were working on. She did not ask him anything he wasn't ready to answer. Liuhe was grateful for this in a very simple and direct way. That evening he listened to Muyun's voicemail. He listened to it twice. Muyun's voice sounded different. Slower, stripped of its usual forward momentum. The voice of someone who had finally stopped running and was standing still inside something difficult. He was not ready to talk, but he was listening. He sent the text. He set his phone face down. He sat at the window of the impersonal apartment and let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. Not managed, not redirected, just felt. The grief of a person who had loved carefully and completely and had not been seen. He sat with it until it was bearable. Then he went to bed. Chapter 6: What the editor said and what the cafe held. Qian Bo, Muyun's editor, called him into her office on a gray Thursday. She was behind her desk when he arrived, glasses on, the expression of a woman who already knows what she is going to say and is deciding how directly to say it. "Tell me what happened," she said. He told her everything. The phone call with Yanfei, the documents he signed without reading, the empty hook, the cupboard he had never opened, the voicemail, the 3 weeks of sitting alone in the apartment looking at everything he had not seen. When he finished, Qian Bo took off her glasses. "The night you met Leoa," she said. "What did you write when you got home?" Muyun blinked. "The opening chapter of my 3rd novel. You told me that chapter came from nowhere. That inspiration just arrived." "Ah, yes. And the night you met Yanfei? What did you write?" "Notes. Ideas. I was excited, but I didn't write an actual chapter." Qian Bo looked at him steadily. "So the man you credited with inspiring your best work," she said, "was actually your husband, and you gave the credit to someone else." Muyun was quiet for a long time. "Yes," he said. "I think that's right." "The question," Qian Bo said, putting her glasses back on, "is not whether you made mistakes. You made significant mistakes. The question is what you do now and whether what you do is real or just guilt in disguise." She picked up his manuscript. "Also, chapter 7 is baggy in the middle. Fix it." Liuhe agreed to meet 6 weeks after he left. He chose a small cafe near the university, somewhere they had gone together in the earlier years of their marriage, back when Sundays were slow. Muyun arrived early. He sat in the corner and did not rehearse what he was going to say, because he had learned that with Liuhe, prepared speeches sounded like prepared speeches and Liuhe always heard the difference. Liuhe arrived exactly on time. He sat down. He ordered tea without looking at the menu because he already knew what he wanted. He looked at Muyun. "What did you want to say?" he asked. "I want to tell you what I understand now," Muyun said. "Not to ask for anything, just because you deserve to hear me say it clearly." Liuhe waited. "I moved through the life you built for 3 years and I used it and I didn't see it. I didn't see the list in the cupboard. I didn't know what book you were reading. I couldn't tell you what was in the photograph on the dresser. I gave Yanfei credit in interviews for creative energy that actually came from the stability you gave me, and I didn't even know I was doing it." Muyun held Liuhe's eyes. "The opening of my 3rd novel, the chapter everyone said was my best work. I wrote that the night I met you. I never told anyone that. I was protecting it for some reason I didn't understand. I understand now. It was because it was yours and I knew it and I didn't know how to say it." Liuhe looked at the table. "The hardest part," he said after a long silence, "was that you were happy. I could see that you were comfortable, that our life was working for you." He looked up. "And it still wasn't enough to make you present in it. That meant the problem wasn't that I hadn't given enough. It was that you weren't looking at what was there." "You're right," Muyun said. "I know." They stayed for another hour. They talked about smaller things, his current project, a book Muyun had just finished. Ordinary conversation. No stakes, no negotiations. It was the most honest they had talked in 2 years. Outside on the cold pavement, Liuhe paused. "I went back for a book I'd forgotten," he said. "I found a note in the space where the sculpture used to be." Muyun had done this. In the middle of a sleepless night, he had written something on a scrap of paper and folded it and put it in the empty space on the shelf. He had half forgotten doing it. "It was a good note," Liuhe said. Then he walked away before Muyun could ask what that meant. Muyun stood on the pavement in the cold and held that sentence carefully. It was a good note. It was not forgiveness. It was not a door opening. But it was something. And he had learned, in the past 6 weeks, to be grateful for something without demanding it become more. Chapter 7: 1 text a week. Muyun set himself a rule. 1 text message a week. No more. Nothing that demanded a response. Just one true thing sent and left alone. Week 1. I found the recipe book in the kitchen drawer. Your handwriting is in the margins of half the pages. Adjustments you made. I used the fish recipe on Saturday. It was better than I made it. Week 2. I've been thinking about what you said at the cafe, that the hardest part was that I seemed happy. You're right. I was comfortable inside the life you built without being present in it. Those are very different things, and I confused them for 3 years. Week 3. I started a new chapter today. The main character pays attention to every room he enters. I'm writing him slowly. It's harder than writing fast. I think that's the point. Liuhe read each text. Sometimes he replied. Sometimes he didn't. When he replied, it was brief and precise. Week 2 reply. I know you were comfortable. That was never in question. L. Week 3 reply. Writing slowly is harder for you. Good. L. On the 5th week, Muyun wrote, I found a shop near the university that sells handmade objects. An old woman at the counter said every piece has a weight and you have to pick it up to feel which kind it is. I thought of you. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I just thought you should know I'm learning to notice things. Liuhe read this 3 times. Then he wrote back. What does the shop look like? Muyun wrote him a paragraph. The smell of wood and lacquer. The handwritten tags on every item. A row of small wooden boxes along the back shelf. The way the light came through a small window in the afternoon. He wrote it carefully with attention to detail, the way he wrote the things that mattered. Liuhe read it 3 times. Then, I would like to see it. They met at the shop on a Saturday. It was warm inside, slightly crowded with objects, everything handmade, nothing present that didn't have a use. Liuhe moved through it the way he moved through any space, with full attention, picking things up and setting them down carefully, reading them through his hands. Muyun watched him. He had been practicing watching, not analyzing, not waiting for his turn to speak, just paying attention. Liuhe stopped at a small wooden box with a brass clasp. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The joinery is clean, he said quietly. Someone spent a long time on this. Can I see? Liuhe handed it to him. Their fingers overlapped in the handover. Neither mentioned it. The box was heavier than it looked. You told me once that things surprise you with their weight, Muyun said. The Kyoto sculpture. I remember you telling me that. I didn't ask you anything else about it at the time. No, Liuhe said. You didn't. What were you thinking when you picked it up? Liuhe was quiet for a moment. They were standing between 2 shelves, the shop quiet around them. I was thinking I wanted to bring you something real, he said. Something made by a person who spent time on it. I was thinking I missed you even when we were in the same room, and that I didn't know how to say that in a way you would actually hear. Muyun held the wooden box. He felt its weight. I'm sorry, he said. Just that. Just the 2 words, plainly. I know, Liuhe said. Muyun bought the box. They walked outside into the cold afternoon and walked without deciding on a direction, the way they used to in the beginning. I'm not ready to come back, Liuhe said. Today doesn't mean that. I know. I don't know if I will be. I know that too. Muyun held the box under his arm. I'm not waiting for a decision. I'm just showing up. Being the person I should have been. That's all I'm doing. They walked a little further. Then Liuhe said, text me next week. I will, Muyun said. Chapter 8 Coming Home. 3 months after the shop visit. Liuhe called instead of texting. Muyun was at his desk when his phone rang. He picked up immediately. Hi, Liuhe said. Hi. I finished the community center project today. Final submission. A pause. Wei Shu and I are getting dinner. She asked if I was inviting anyone. A pause. I want to invite you, Liuhe said. If you want to come. Yes, Muyun said. No hesitation. Tell me where. The dinner was easy. Wei Shu was funny and sharp and welcomed Muyun without making a production of it, which he understood was its own kind of kindness. He watched Liuhe across the table. The way he laughed at Wei Shu's stories, genuinely and without performance. The rare, real laugh that Muyun had spent 3 years hearing without fully listening to. He listened now. He watched now. He was paying attention. Afterward, walking to their cars, Wei Shu disappeared tactfully ahead and Muyun and Liuhe stood on the pavement in the still evening. The service department doesn't have any weight, Liuhe said. Nothing in it has any history. Nothing was chosen. I know what you mean, Muyun said. I'm not saying what I want yet. I need to be certain it's a real decision. He looked at Muyun. But the door isn't closed. That's enough, Muyun said. More than enough. Liuhe put his hand out between them, open. Not a handshake, just his hand. Muyun took it. They stood there. Not everything they had been, not yet sure what they were becoming. Both of them willing to find out. Liuhe squeezed once and let go. I'll call you, he said. I'll be here, said Muyun. Liuhe came home on a Sunday in early spring. He called on Saturday evening. I'd like to bring my things back tomorrow, if that's all right. Muyun said yes and spent that evening making sure the apartment was clean and waiting. The hook by the door empty, everything in its place. Liuhe arrived at 10 in the morning with 2 boxes and a bag. They carried everything in without ceremony. Liuhe walked through the apartment. He put his 3 books back on the shelf. He set the Kyoto sculpture back on the side table. He hung his keys on the hook. The compass charm caught the light. He turned around. Muyun was standing in the doorway watching. The hook looks right now, Muyun said. Yes, Liuhe said. It does. Then Liuhe went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and Muyun listened to the familiar sounds of it. The tap, the kettle, the quiet of someone making themselves at home, and pressed one hand flat against the doorframe and breathed. Chapter 9: How They Rebuilt. They did not pretend the year had not happened. This was the most important thing. There was no reset, no going back to before as if before had been fine. Before had not been fine. Before was exactly the thing that had brought them here. 2 weeks after Liuhe came home, they sat at the kitchen table after dinner and made 2 agreements. Muyun said, I need you to tell me when you feel invisible. Not file it away. Actually tell me. I know it's hard for you. I'm asking anyway. Liuhe said, I need you to tell me when you're slipping, when you notice yourself going elsewhere when you should be here. Say it out loud instead of just going. Okay. They both said. They shook on it at their kitchen table, which was slightly absurd and completely serious, and then Liuhe smiled. The real one, rare and genuine, and Muyun felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a very long time. Muyun changed his habits. Not completely, he was still a writer, still prone to disappearing into chapters. But he built in what Liuhe called contact points. Morning coffee together with no phones. Dinner at the table eaten together. Sunday mornings slow and without agenda. He also changed how he talked about his work. When a journalist asked what had inspired his new novel, he said, My husband built me a life I could work inside, and I spent 3 years not seeing it. Now I see it. The journalist wrote it down, slightly puzzled. Muyun didn't explain further. Liuhe read the interview and said nothing. But that evening he made Muyun's favorite dinner without being asked. Liuhe practiced saying things. It was hard for him. He was not a person who expressed need easily. But he tried. Small things first. I felt left out this week. I needed more from you yesterday. I missed you even though you were here. They came out stiff, like someone speaking a language they were still learning. Muyun received each one with full attention, without defending himself, without rushing to fix it. Just, I hear you. Thank you for telling me. It was simple. Not easy, but simple. And they kept doing it. Chapter 10: Xiao Mei. The conversation about adopting a child happened on a quiet Sunday in the 2nd year of their rebuilt marriage. They were both at the kitchen table, Liuhe with blueprints, Muyun with a manuscript, when Liuhe looked up and said simply, I've been thinking about adopting. Tell me, Muyun said, which was his first response to most things Liuhe said now. I think we have something to give. A child who needs a home. I've been thinking about it for a while. He paused. I wanted to know what you thought. Muyun was quiet for a moment. He was actually thinking about it, not just preparing a response. I want to say yes, he said slowly. But I want to say it fully, with both eyes open. Can we talk about it properly before we decide? Not just agree because it sounds good. Actually talk about whether we're ready and what it needs from us. Liuhe looked at him. Something settled in his face. That's exactly what I wanted you to say, he said. They talked about it for 3 months. Practically and honestly. Muyun's working hours. Liuhe's travel schedule. What kind of home they could offer. Who would they lean on? Wei Shu, who said finally and immediately began researching schools. Qian Bo, who had very strong opinions about children that she delivered without being asked. They applied in the spring. The process was long and full of paperwork and waiting, which was hard for Muyun, and which Liuhe managed by ensuring there was always something constructive to do. The call came on a Tuesday in late autumn. A little girl, 14 months old. Her name in the file was Xiao Mei, Little Plum Blossom. She had been in foster care for 4 months. She was healthy. She was curious. She apparently examined everything she could reach with great seriousness. Muyun took the call at his desk. When it ended, he sat very still for a moment. Then he called Liuhe. They called, he said. On the other end of the phone, Liuhe was quiet for a long moment. Then, very softly, "Tell me." Muyun told him everything. The name, the age, the detail about examining everything she could reach, which felt like the most important detail. Liuhe was silent on the other end. Then Muyun heard something he had only heard a few times in 5 years. Liuhe's breath. Not quite steady. "I'm coming home," Liuhe said. "I'll be here," said Muyun. She came home on a Friday. Liuhe had repainted the small room at the end of the hall, a warm, soft yellow, with low bookshelves already half filled with picture books. The wooden box from the handmade shop sat on the lowest shelf at exactly the height she could reach when she was old enough to want to. Inside the box, Liuhe had placed the note Muyun had written and left in the empty space on the shelf. The night he finally understood what he had lost. He had never told Muyun he put it there. Muyun had never asked. Some things do not need explaining. Xiao Mei arrived in the arms of her foster mother. She had large, dark, serious eyes, and she looked at Muyun with the evaluating gaze of someone who takes their time forming opinions. Then she reached out and grabbed his collar with one small fist and held on. Muyun stood completely still. He was afraid to move in case he broke something. He was also, he realized, completely and instantly finished. He looked at Liuhe. Liuhe was standing slightly to the side, and his face, composed, careful, always controlled Liuhe, was entirely open. The composure simply gone, replaced by something too large to contain. Liuhe crouched down slowly to Xiao Mei's level. He held out one hand, open and patient. She looked at it for a moment. Then she reached out one finger and pressed it against his palm. Testing weight. "Good things are always heavier than they look," Liuhe said quietly. To Muyun. To the room. To no one in particular. "Yes," Muyun said. His voice was not quite steady. "I know." Epilogue. One Sunday morning. Xiao Mei was 2 years old and had opinions about everything. She had opinions about which cup her juice went in, which parent read the bedtime story, whether the porridge had too much or not enough of the thing she called the sweet stuff, which was honey, a word she was working on. She called Muyun Ba and Liuhe Baba, a distinction she had arrived at independently, with the confident authority of a 2-year-old who had decided how things were. She had also learned to climb out of her crib. Muyun woke to small feet in the hallway and the sound of a determined 2-year-old attempting a door handle she was not quite tall enough for. He got up and opened it before she managed it. She looked up at him with her dark, serious eyes. Then she pointed firmly down the hallway toward the kitchen. "Good morning to you too," he said. He picked her up. She grabbed his collar, still her preferred handle, unchanged since the first day, and they went to the kitchen. Liuhe was already at the stove, making porridge, focused and quiet the way he was every morning. He looked over his shoulder when they came in. "She got out again," Muyun said. "We need a different handle for the door," Liuhe said. "Or a moat." Xiao Mei pointed at the stove with great authority. She had been trying to communicate for weeks that she wanted to help cook. "Soon," Liuhe told her, in the same calm tone he used every time. Not dismissive, a genuine promise. "When you're taller, when you're ready, we will wait for you." Xiao Mei considered this. Then she leaned her head against Muyun's neck and decided to wait. Muyun stood in the kitchen on a Sunday morning holding his daughter, watching his husband make porridge in the pale light, listening to the small sounds of a morning in a home that was full and ordinary and real. He had almost signed it all away. He had signed the papers without reading them, in the middle of a phone call, without understanding what was in his hands. He thought about that sometimes, not with guilt anymore, but with the specific attention of someone who has learned the hard way to read carefully. Every document, every room, every person standing right beside him. Muyun, Liuhe said. You're thinking loudly. Sorry. Don't apologize. Liuhe looked over his shoulder. His face was quiet and warm, unguarded in the way it had become in their kitchen, in their mornings, in the life they had rebuilt carefully and kept. What are you thinking? That I almost missed all of this, Muyun said. And that I'm glad I didn't. Liuhe held his gaze for a moment. Then he turned back to the stove. The porridge is ready, he said. I'll set the table, said Muyun. He set 3 bowls. 1 large, 1 medium, 1 very small with a painted rabbit on the side, because Xiao Mei had chosen it herself and would not accept any other bowl. Liuhe served the porridge. Xiao Mei banged her spoon on the table until food appeared in front of her, which was her standard procedure. The Sunday morning went the way Sunday mornings went in this house. Ordinary and warm and completely solidly real. The study on the desk, a manuscript waited. Its title was The Weight of Everything. Its dedication page said only, "For L who built it," and for M who finally looked up. It was the best thing he had ever written. He almost signed it all away without reading it. He spent the rest of his life making sure he read every word. The end.